but I'm going to kind of start at the beginning. As with any dive, you've got to start at the top and work your way down. So just to make sure that we kind of do a little bit of a level set, we'll run through some of the the methodologies in terms of creating an active board, and then we'll dive deeper into things like how to do some cool things with tables, how to do and why you want to do aggregation optimizations so that your active boards render faster. And then if we have some time, we'll take a look at some of the more interesting widgets I think that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video so that we can focus on the share. So everyone should be able to see my screen. Where I'm starting is kind of like a normal methodology that you can use in order to create your active board. And the first thing, because everything in Devo, of course, is run off of query. A query drives all of the activities in Devo, alerting active boards, obviously searching, our integrations with things like SOAR and our deep trace is all driven by query. So one place to start when you are thinking about creating a visualization that you want to persist in an active board is to start in query. So here we see a query. I've got it set. This query is showing basically all the users that have been in this domain in the last day, and some of the actions and the places that they've been. It's one of the internal auditing tables. So one of the things that I like to do if I'm, utilizing a query somewhere else is to give it a name. And one way that you can rename your query is right here on the navigation bar. So I'm just going to say this is just call this a user list. And so the reason I do that is other places in the product where you go to find queries, we display them either one of two ways, with the alias, which I just gave here, user list, or if we haven't been provided with an alias, we display it by the table name. And sometimes by the table name, it can be you have to kind of root around to figure out the query that that you want to use, that you designed for utilization elsewhere. So giving it a name, maybe even favoriting it, that can help you on our next step, which is to go in and start working with an active board. One of the other best practices that I like to employ is multiple tabs, so that if I am working on a query, I'm able to bounce back and forth between active boards and data search, say, without having to refresh the screen. And so the simplest way to have multiple tabs is to right click on the tab itself in your browser and click duplicate. Devo does do session management. So we know that your session that was initiated through the first tab is carried into the second tab. And if you close a tab out or you log into another domain, if you do have multi-domain access, or you log out of one tab, when you go back to that other tab, it will inform you, hey, this tab is now orphaned, you need to relog in. So it'll do that session management for you. So here I'm going to go into active boards. I've set this up so that my default active board is a blank. So you do have the ability to choose in your active board manager. So if we take a look at our toolbar across the top, we've got a few options here. The first is the active board manager, shows all the different active boards that I've got. And with the ellipse, remember in Devo, the ellipse is important. It gives you all the cool things that you can do with an object within a list. And so here I can set as the default so that whenever I come in, this is the active board that displays. So and you can choose any active board that you like as your default. I can do other things like finding active boards, favoriting them. So if I click on my favorites, that way I can filter through utilizing the manager. I also have, this is a kind of a session that keeps track of the recent active boards that I've been working with, and I can close these out if I don't want them on that list. So that's another fast way, that we end up in a lot of production environments, I realize, where you may have tons of active boards, and just kind of being able to find the one that you want, that you work with a lot, can be helpful. I also have another ellipse here, and these are Activeboard level things that I can do in my workspace here. If I switch my mode from viewing to editing, this menu changes, and there's a bunch of different things that I can do. Editing raw configuration on an Activeboard can be very helpful. One of the things that I do, and again, I'm working with a lot of different domains, so this may or may not apply, but one of the things that I do is that if I have an Activeboard that I really like, that I use over and over again in multiple domains, I just edit the raw configuration and I copy the whole thing, and I just save it off. And then that way, if I go into a new domain and I want to drop in an Activeboard, I just go edit raw configuration and paste it, and it renders immediately. So that's one, a methodology that we use to move Activeboards around, besides, of course, the Exchange, where you can go and get all the out-of-the-box content that around Activeboards and alerts and other things that Devo provides, and we will install that for you right from the Exchange. And the cool thing about those is that everything, you can clone them like you see here, and keep the out-of-the-box copy around, have your own copy, and everything's open. So you don't have to, reinvent the wheel every single time you want to work with Activeboards. We're going to talk about some of the things that you can do here today, but keep in mind, you've got some other experts, more expertise than I've got, really, designing Activeboards and presenting them in our Exchange. And those are all open, and you can go and see exactly how they're built, and work with them as you need. The plus, of course, is adding a new Activeboard. And when you do so, you basically start with this space, and you have in edit mode, you've got 3 toolboxes available. Always you have your calendar control. That is here because again, since everything in Devo is driven by query, and all queries in Devo need to have a duration, a start and a finish, a from and a to, then that's why there's a calendar control here that you can utilize to display your content. Keep in mind, and we'll show you, that you can also have individual timeframes for specific widgets. You're not constrained by having one time to fit them all, and we'll show you how you can set that up very easily. So the starting point with any Activeboard is the widgets, right? These are the visualizations. The terminology we use is widget. And so in order to bring a widget in, it's just a drag and drop operation. So for instance, if I wanted this Voronoi, I just drag it in, and now it's ready. So now I need to assign a data source, a query, to this widget so that it can render, plot, whatever it is that it does. And there's a couple of different ways of doing that. The data toolbox here is kind of the primary way, and I've got 3 options here. I can bring in the query that is in my last search queries. You notice here I've got this user list. This is the query that I ran and gave a name. You can see why it's can be helpful, like this firewall Palo Alto traffic. If I just leave my mouse on the query, it'll show me what it is, right? So I can see exactly what it is. But if I've given it a name, then I can quickly assign that by just grabbing it, dragging it, and it'll render the result. So when I want to work and customize this widget, I need to get to its properties page. 2 ways of doing that. I can do that through the ellipse and choose properties, or I can just click on the title bar and it'll bring up the properties page for me. Each property page or the property page for each widget has 3 tabs: data, visual, and raw. The data tab is the same for each widget in that you see the widget ID. You notice you can't change that. We'll talk to why that is here in a second. You've got the name of the widget, so I can provide a name, and as soon as I click away, you see how it changed the title of the widget, and I can also provide a description. I've got the data source. This is the query that's running that widget. If I want to edit that, I just click on the edit button. That opens up my editor down below. I could leave this editor open because as I add more widgets and I start editing, it will open up additional tabs with all the editing available, and that can be very helpful if I need to switch back and forth. If I'm doing some interactivity between widgets, which we'll do here in a sec, having both queries open all the time or 10 queries or whatever it is can be helpful, so I can quickly switch between widget queries and do the editing that I need to do. The editor is a prompting editor, so as I type, it will try to figure out what I'm doing and provide me with prompts, and I can use those and select from the choices if I want, in order to kind of smooth my my editing process. This is that custom date range that I talked about. So, and if I turn this on, when I set this calendar control, when I set this, this will control just this widget. You notice as soon as I turn it on, I get the custom date icon up here. And so that's how I can separate the a widget out so that it's not controlled by the main calendar. And a good example is that is I may have a Activeboard where I've got some fixed widgets that I always want to see the last 24 hours, and I have other widgets that I want to be able to kind of go with the last hour or the last 6 weeks or whatever it is, and that helps being able to do that. I've got this data fetching method where one of the things that we've done to kind of help the Activeboard performance is let you decide how often it's going to refresh and fetch data, right? Whether it's going to be on demand, whether it's going to be every single time you refresh or whatnot. So you've got some choices here. Especially this, you may never use this, but the idea that you might have some Activeboards with really big data sets behind the widgets, and you can decide how often you want that to basically go out and grab the data. The visual tab for each Activeboard is, each widget is unique because these are the properties of that visualization. And so over in our docs, if you go into the docs and look for Activeboards and you say, hey, I want to create and populate Activeboards and using widgets, we have a section here, widget types, that runs down all the different widgets, all the and breaks out all the different properties, all the things that you can do, and you can just start clicking around as well and say, hey, I want to change, say for instance, the keys that I want to utilize for my Activeboard. I'm going to refresh this here for a sec, and that way you can depending on again the properties, the things that you can do. Here, Voronoi is a layered visualization, so you see how I just added the different layers, and the docs can help you walk through all the different properties. One thing that I will mention is that if you do have an interactive Activeboard where you can make choices and work within that that widget, interactive widget is what I meant to say. Escape is your friend. So if you are working in a widget and you hit escape, that just resets it, and that can be a helpful tip. And then there's the raw. We've got some folks that want to go in and make some customizations. We use high charts for these widgets, and there are some things that you can do in the raw. I wouldn't say that it's a typical thing that is done, but there are some settings. Sometimes folks want certain colors or want to set a size or something along those lines. Most everything is available in the properties, the visual properties page, but there are some additional customizations that, very rarely, but it's available. Okay, so that's my first widget. That's how we manage the widgets. Now the idea of Activeboards, right? The reason we don't call these dashboards is because we feel like when you have interactivity where I can drive a dashboard and actually change what I'm looking at on the screen without changing the Activeboard itself, that's an activity, and that's where we came up with the term Activeboard. So how do I make interactivity in an Activeboard? Well, it's all about inputs. It's all about letting the user, either myself or my coworkers, come in and make changes to what they see, provide filters, do investigations, whatever it might be, how I've set this up, the use case, without actually changing the underlying Activeboard, without actually knowing, all the queries and all that kind of stuff. I can just work directly here in this visual realm. And so I've got two types of inputs that I can bring in. One is an input. This is a text entry field, and the other is a select, which I'm going to bring in here. And the select is either a single or a multi drop down. And so I could technically do a static list and have that populate this drop down. But the better way, really, and since everything's driven by query, is to give this widget a query so that it can provide me with the list dynamically. So I'm going to start by making another widget here. The thing with inputs is what's going to happen is there's going to be a relationship between the input and a widget, or between the input and another input. We can do cascading, where it's like you fill out a form, and when you're done providing all the information, the final widget renders its result. You can have one input that manages multiple widgets. You can have multiple inputs for one widget, like I just talked about, filling out the form. So there's lots of different options and different approaches that you can take to utilizing the widgets. So if I take a query here for my donut, and I say, I'm just going to edit it here in my edit window, and I say, hey, show me, I want to see all the different activities that have been done in this domain in the last, in this case, I have it set to an hour. So these are all the different things that have been done. But what if I wanted to narrow this down and provide a filter that said, well, now show me what individual users have done, right? So the way that I can do that is I can provide a user list and provide a filter for my users to determine my users. So I'm going to open up this second query window here, and I'm going to provide a query to this drop down, to the select input that says, hey, show me all the users, right? Now, these aren't tied together. Choosing a user is not going to change anything in my in my donut widget here until I link the two together. And the way that I do that is through the use of a variable that identifies the widget where I want to get the information from. In this case, this is why it's important that even though I may be able to change the name of this widget, I always know that it's select 0 because its property page tells me so. And that way I can call out that widget in a where clause, in a filter clause. So what this filter clause says is two things. One, if I haven't selected anything, just show me all the data in the resulting query. Or if I have selected something, replace this select 0 value variable with the value that I have selected. So if I go ahead and click on, actually I need to save this first, and I go ahead and click on, oh, did I, navigation, I accidentally, and here's my prompt helping me out here. I accidentally deleted something. So now I'm looking at just what Dean did, or I'm looking at just what I did. And so, and if I clear that, it's going to show me what everybody did. So this is a good tip in terms of this is empty type of query, where that if I didn't have that, this would come back and say, you haven't selected anything, I can't render. But by having the choice of being empty or having a value, I always have a result in my widget, and it's much nicer, I think, for usability for the users. Okay, so this is the key part, right? This $select0. If I do an input, a text input, the text input value is going to be $input number 0, 1, 2, and they just serialize as you add them to the Activeboard input 1, etc. And dot value. So $, input type, the number, dot value. But I can also use a table as an input. So I'm going to clean up my workspace a little bit, get rid of the things. So I'm going to just get rid of all of it. And so when I use a table as an input, the variable is a little bit different, but it's the exact same idea. So if I brought in a query here into my environment, and I'm going to do a free text query. One of the things that I can do is if I just drag this into the workspace, it's just going to automatically create a table. So, a little bit of a shortcut. So this table is just showing me a count of IP addresses from my firewall, and the list of those addresses. But say I wanted to be able to use this list to control another widget. So here I'm going to bring in a line chart, and I'm going to assign a query to that. I'm going to do it this other methodology. And here's a line chart that's showing me my different amounts of bytes that have flown through my firewall. I'm going to go here. I'm going to add some additional value, just break it out between all the data that was sent, the data that was received. So I've got 3 things that I want to look at. If I wanted to say, okay, this is all of the data through the firewall. What if I just want to cycle this down and just look at individual IP addresses? And so the way that I do that is, again, I'm going to add a where clause, a filter, and that is going to provide me with the, oh, actually it's already here, with the connection between this line chart and my input. In this case, it's the table. And you can see here, it's just a variation on the theme, right? Variable with a $sign. In this case, it's table, and then the number of the table. This is table 0. And then cell clicked. So this is going to show me this if it's empty, or with the is null, or where there's an actual value. That way, again, I always get data. But if I go in here and I click on an IP address, now it's showing me specifically just the result for that IP address. So that's using the table as the input. What if I wanted to, at the same time, when I'm looking at my my data that's going through, if I also wanted to look at where in the world that is actually going to, what the activity was on a map. And so I can do that by having one of our maps. In this case, it's the marker map. And I'm going to be utilizing the our out-of-the-box MaxMind capability, latitude and longitude for an IP address, for a public IP address. And you see here, I've got this table cell clicked where clause, the same one that's in this, that's the line chart is being driven. And you can see how when I go and click around, the input is going to change. I do like a 162 here, still in America. I know there's some in here that are, this is all dummy data, but now I'm in Europe, right? So I can see the two widgets together, but driven by a single input. And I can have as many widgets as I want driven by a single input, or I can do multiple inputs, etc. So an example of some of these other multiple inputs and inputs drive other inputs is here in this Activeboard where, for instance, I can fill out this form. I can say who's had user management activity. And if I look at this query here, it's just going to feed, go out and get the that activity. So if I go here and I say I'm going to just create a role and I'm going to call it test, and I'm going to do one basic little activity that this role can do. And then I realize, oh, nope, actually I want to delete this role. I really don't want it. And I can just delete it. If I go back here now to my Activeboard and I refresh this Activeboard and I go back actually even just 12 hours and apply, I could refresh the individual widget as well. Now I've got a cascading input. This says select the user to see role management action. Okay, this is the user that did some role management. That was me. What did I do? I created and I deleted. And so I said, oh, someone deleted a role. That's interesting. And then this shows me here what was actually done, and then the role name of the test. So this is the example of the cascading, right? Fill out the form and get a result. That can be super helpful for things like, doing investigations without actually having to open up query. If you have something that you've got a repetitive motion, you can use the Activeboard and use it with your users to just, fill out the board rather than going into data search if that's, what they want to do. So here I've got, again, a table access. So I click on the table name and see actually who accessed that table. Here I've got multiple inputs. I can change. I can say, show me, the specific user, or I can even input a domain name and it'll show me everyone from that domain. So a lot of different things that I can do with that interactivity. I'm going to pause here for a moment. I know we've gone over, but I'm going to continue on since we're making a recording of this as well. Got some other things I want to show. Any questions?
You got 10 minutes.
I got 10 minutes. Any questions at this point? If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and Juan will do a little triage and feed me some questions if we've got any at this point. I'm going to go back to my deep dive examples and do a little cleanup here. Should start a new one. Were there any questions that came across, one?
Not yet.
Okay, so I'll go on to kind of the next thing that I was going to show you, which is a cool feature that you can do with tables. So I'm going to bring a table in here. Actually, I'm just going to bring the query in. There's a thing that you can do with tables where you can embed charts in the actual table itself. So what you do with this capability is you let me go back for the past day, apply, is you, in your query, and it's a different kind of query, the embedded chart is called it's called a Sparkline. And you can do, there's two types of Sparklines. There's columns, a little bar chart, and a little like a line chart that's actually embedded in a field. And you see here, this field hourly cent has multiple values. These are actually the plot lines for a line chart. And you can see that what we're doing here is we are actually running two queries simultaneously. One query is for the entire table, and one query is specifically for the embedded chart. And when I get a result here, and this is a specific syntax, and if you search on Sparkline in the documentation, it'll bring up exactly how you build this, but it'll give you a template for the syntax. But the syntax is two queries, and then at the end of the overall Sparkline query, you present and you tell it the groups that you've got for each query. So in my first query, I have a group called app. And in my second query, I have a group called two groups, hourly sent and hourly received. And then it will run both those queries. And for these columns here, it'll go out and it's kind of like a subquery, and it'll run all of the values necessary to plot some charts. And if I go into my visual tab for my table, because I've presented this type of query, it will present me with these values, and I can actually change the format of these columns. And in this case, my format is Sparkline. And now, rather than having just the plots, I've got a little mini chart. You can do the same for hourly received. I also have the ability to do that with a column. So I've got Sparkline. Too long here. And I also have column. And so I've got these two embedded charts. And sometimes when you're, presenting data, this is a trend. So this gives me a snapshot, right? What happened in the last day or the last time period that I have on my time picker. And then this shows me, okay, for that same period, this is what the trend was hourly. And I can see that all now in one spot. So Sparklines can be really helpful for quick digestion of both, larger time frames as a number or a value, and then also a breakdown or a trend over that period. Okay, did we end up with any questions?
I think we're all just mesmerized
Okay.
watching the wizard at work.
Okay. One of the things that that I wanted to show as well was the idea of conditional formatting. So and again with tables. So say I wanted to, if a certain value was reached in my sent bytes, right? That I wanted to have my analysts be able to quickly say, oh, this is over what is a threshold that I want to monitor for. And I can add conditions to my table fields, and I can say something like, show me if there's anything greater than, say, 200,000, and mark that in red. And you see here, now it's in red. And I can also change the background color. I really want this to stand out, so I even want to change the cell color itself so that quickly an analyst can come in and see the values that I want to accentuate based upon my conditional formatting. So that's another powerful tool that you've got. I've taken this table, and with the right kind of query and a few property settings, I've turned it into, I think, a much more robust tool for monitoring rather than just looking at numbers, which for me can get just kind of blurry over time. Okay, the kind of the final deep dive I wanted to do was showing some additional examples of some widgets that aren't necessarily used all the time, right? We have a lot of the pie charts and the line charts and stuff, but we've got some additional widgets that we've been adding recently that can do some pretty cool things. Um, the first one here is what we call the timeline. And what the timeline does is it shows you, in this case, these are allows and denies over different destinations, but it's showing it on a timeline so that I can, go through time and, I can see the values actually broken out for me by country. And the query for this is pretty much the same as any other query, except it's got some conditionals built in to the query itself, where I can give the value. In this case, this is a conditional if then else, which says if something, then do something. Else, if it's not that, then do this other thing. And I can use this conditional for a lot of different activities in Devo. In this case, what I'm saying is if the action is deny, then set the cell for this widget, because I know timeline has these little boxes, set it red. Otherwise, I'm sorry, the black. So this says always set it black is really what it's doing. That's the text. But the box, set it red. Otherwise, if it's not deny, set it green. And I can embed these together. So if I have more than two choices, I can just kind of cascade them and build up exactly how I want it to behave. And the reason that I do this is because when I go into the visual properties for the timeline, I can select groups. That's what's going to control this y-axis here and all the different groupings that it shows. That's based upon the country. And then I can customize and go in and I say, what's the color that I want? And that's where it pulls out my list here. If I take a look, actually has all of the field cast names that I put into my query. But I've specifically said I want font color for color, and I want background color for background color. So it knows how to render these hex colors and then render my widget. So that's a pretty, again, if you want to display a lot of data over a timeline, I think this is a pretty cool way of doing that. And this does things like being able to allow me to collapse down and do those kinds of things as well. Another cool widget that we've got is called the Timelapse. And what this allows me to do, the query for this is like super simple. I mean, literally it's show me bytes, right? Because what this widget does is it's going to show the same value, but in different periods of time. In this case, the value is bytes, how many bytes. And what I've done is I've said, over the last day, this shows a chart of all the bytes. But what I can do is I can control the different time frames. I'm going to close this out here. I can control what I'm looking at in terms of the different time frames. So my orange value, I can drag this control, and you see down below, this is changing the time frame. That way I can evaluate the same data point, but in different time periods overlaid on top of each other. Different the Grafana's got one of these. I think they call it Chronos, and there's different charting applications that have the same type of visualization. Here we call it the time lapse, and the query is super simple, and really the visual properties of it are pretty basic. So there's not a lot, tells you the lapses. You can actually give them, I left these default, but I can give them different names if I want, so my legend changes and whatnot. But it's a really good way to evaluate a data point in different time frames right on top of each other and find, immediately you'd be able to find deltas or spikes. It's like, why in this time frame here as compared to a historical time frame, why is there a difference? And is that something that I want to monitor? And the last one, actually not the last one, another one I wanted to show real quick was the dependency wheel. This is some folks I think call this a sand key. So basically the idea is I want to see the relationship between between different data points. In this case, it's the relationship from my firewall that's showing me why a session ended and the country that it was associated with. If I'm trying to, as a networking issue or whatever, I'm trying to figure out why is something constantly getting killed or dying. In this case, a session dying in an unusual way, getting a reset either from server or whatever. Is this a country-based thing, right? But I can make this relationship between, obviously, since it's query, between any data points that I'd like, and this visualization really helps me to see that relationship between those data points just by mousing over. And again, the query is all pretty standard. The visualization is very very basic, but you end up actually with a pretty robust interactive widget here. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was the stacked columns, the ability to see, have a bar chart, but actually have it show me multiple values in each bar, which again, if I'm dealing with a lot of data, stacking it can help me to have, all this data presented in a very small footprint. And so in this, the setup for this is the exact same query almost that my SandKey has. So this is not a query-driven widget per se. It's all about the properties and choosing, the series is what creates the stack. So in this case, it's the country. And then the y-axis, of course, here is the count. And then the x-axis is the category. So I can say, for computer and internet info, when my firewall categorized the activity, where was that happening, right? In what country in this case? So it's really all about making sure that you've got the values you want to monitor, in this case, the category, and then the series that you want to apply it to, in this case, the country, and that'll create my stack for me. Okay, that was all of the different widgets that I wanted to cover. Hopefully this was helpful. Still open to questions if there are any, but keep in mind that all of this is also discussed in depth in our docs, and of course you all are members of the community, so we can have discussions there as well.
Thank you very much, Darren. Before anybody goes, if you guys want to let me know what you want to see in the next deep dive, I have this little survey that everyone should be getting in their screen. And I think with that, if you have any questions, now is the time. If you want to see anything more on this topic, just let me know in the chat. But I'm more than happy to keep doing these and go as deep as you guys want to see. We have a question. I wanted to inquire whether we have default Activeboard setup specifically for monitoring malicious activity of malware incident. Actually, we just released an Activeboard on DNS or something. You should see it in the community now. Threat hunting by DNS, and I think there's another Activeboard that we just released. So you will see those in the community right now, and you can try them out. I think there's more on the way as well. So, yes, there are some.
And there's also a Palo Alto Activeboard that covers Palo Alto threat, if you've got that as a data source. So it has traffic plus threat. So that will show you, from the firewall's perspective, malicious activity as well. And we have a CrowdStrike one that's also covers threats. So yeah, the active boards are kind of evenly divided between the threat-based sources like CrowdStrike or the firewalls or whatnot, and then the more monitoring type, which is authentication activity and things like that, which could show you threats depending on what your data contains. But so look, excuse me, look for the security-based sources under Activeboards, and that'll show you what you're looking for.